Hey, so I work on my fencing a lot. Wild concept. Because I grew up in versions of martial arts where coaches and teachers don't end up training as much. I have become everything I hate. No, not at all. But I do need to work on my own fencing. Because the only way that I'm going to improve my ideas and what I see is through constant betterment. So I get distracted by it. I think to say I get distracted by it is a bit fake because it is an intentional distraction. It's maybe not even a distraction. It's that it is the thing. I did Taekwondo for a bunch of years. That's where I started. And I could already tell that the people with black belts spent more time teaching than training and learning. So I didn't want my black belt, and I had my Shodanbo for a while. And then I still ended up teaching. Wild concept. And everything I do, I end up teaching. And it's quite funny. I don't know. Maybe it's the way to learn. But I need to keep working on what I'm doing. So I teach very selfishly. Doing these videos is a selfish endeavor. Teaching is a selfish endeavor. Improving is a selfish endeavor. To make my community better is a selfish endeavor. To make the world around me nicer is a selfish endeavor. And I'm at peace with saying that. It's not a malicious or like a sadistic or a narcissistic boy BBD. It's not it's not in a negative way that it's selfish, but inherently there is this, I need to do this for me so that I can make sure that I'm leading the idea that people should do things for themselves. I am at training to teach for me and for my goals. Now, helping someone achieve their own goals and achieve the fixes that they need and to improve is in line with my own self-actualization. That means my students would be at training to learn for themselves, not just because of community, not just because of the obligation of this is what I do, therefore I do it, but that it leads towards progress and growth and what they actually truly want. How can I ask someone to learn selfishly and develop selfishly if I can't do the same? That would be rude. So what am I working on? At the moment, I'm working on a few things. I've been working on a few things for about, now it's easy to say 6 months. That has radically changed my idea of movement, my idea of space, my idea of distance, my idea of progression. It's been a lot. It's been a lot in a really cool way. But it has been a lot. Where do I begin? intuition. This idea of intuitive action. This idea of not training an action, not muscle memory, which is fake and not real. The things that make muscle memory real are real, duh. But muscle memory as its own self is not real, and it kind of misses what is occurring. I'm at this kind of war emotionally against simplicity, that like, I must do the simplest action imaginable, for that may be right. This is characterized with a cool interaction of, you should take the shortest line thrust, the shortest line attack, the most direct attack, as that will cover everything, and that will crush through and fit in that space the most efficiently. Those of you who are more politically minded would see parallels with various ideas there. This is not It's not unintentional from someone. Not all, but someone, whoever came up with saying it like that, whoever first really propagated that idea, I am assuming it may have been somewhat intentional. But there's traps there. And I've been seeing those traps. I've been seeing those traps tripping up people who really have dedicated their heart and soul to this. The idea that I'm pushing against that with is the most efficient direct attack that is correct my favorite example of this is that if you're at a strata like distance, maybe on a very close lager, if my answer to your action, or maybe I'm attacking out of tempo, maybe it's just as simple as that, attacking out of tempo. At lager, attack out of tempo, insta-lose. At strata, attack out of tempo. As long as your targeting's right, win. Beautiful things. If my action inspires and gives the intuitive, intelligent player the ability to place their sword into space in a way that is detrimental to yourself, just because on paper it was the most efficient attack for you to move from where you were to where you're going to hit, it may have been, in quotation marks, the most efficient attack. But it wasn't the most efficient attack that is to your benefit. It's not the most efficient attack that truly lets you win. It's not the most efficient attack that is correct to the situation. An older idea that has constantly been within me that I kind of refuse to remove at the moment still, because I've only found the times that it's unnecessary when it's unnecessary, is that The author didn't want you to lose. The author wants you to win. I make this assumption until their literature makes me go, that's sad. They didn't want me to win. They wanted me to do as I was told. This is no longer a youthful book. And I have found some that are like that. And it breaks my heart a little, because I do know of others who throw their heart and soul at that book as if that first assumption is true. And it hurts. The same thing happens with coaches, where someone throws their heart, soul, hopes, dreams, time, money, effort, love, with this assumption that is unchecked of, but is my coach wanting me to succeed? And what does that mean? And does my idea of succeed line up with their idea of succeed? And then we get in the weeds a bit. So if the author says take the most efficient attack, and we make the assumption that they also want you to win, does your interpretation of most efficient attack line up with also wants you to win? They may not have known that they needed to stop you going down the wrong path, because they may not have seen it. It's very funny to have the idea that Fabris goes, funny to me anyway, that Fabris could say such a thing along the lines of, oh, well, yes, that is the straightest, most, like, just your arm goes attack. I don't know why you do that. They'd stab you in the face as you do it. I can't believe that needs to be said. Maybe. I find humor in that. So this idea of just because it is the single most efficient or the single most direct, I can't believe you need to add the caveat that also lets you win. The caveats that I find is this chunk of Fabris that I can't remember where it was. I've quoted it ad nauseum, but I sure as shit couldn't show you the page. Where your weak pierces their weak is where you want your hilt to end up. There are more direct attacks from many positions that do not tick that box. Sometimes that is correct and intelligent to do. Sometimes that is not correct and intelligent to do. I don't know, maybe read the book. So that's something that I'm working on. Another thing that I'm working on is shedding a lot of outdated, incorrectly shoehorned ideas of correct biomechanics in dynamic sport. This is terrifying to me, because this is also shedding my own learned experience. This is shedding ideas from other sports, as shedding sports science that is also outdated. Mike Israetel from RP, Renaissance Periodization and Training, or RP Training. You should follow him. He has many moments where he talks about how sports science as a whole is a bit fucking weird and a bit fucking funny. It's probably the least funded, least critically thought through place of science, mostly because any learning you do affects your career, because you're producing athletes most often. So coaches and trainers kind of need to learn things and hold on to them in a very selfish way. So this is how you end up with like college coaches in the States who make so much money, holy fucking shit. And you have trainers who make so much fucking money, holy fucking shit, because they can actually achieve design briefs with humans somewhat. So if you're not one of those and you're just doing science for the sake of science, well, the money isn't there. And when it is, it's a bit weird. And when you see meta-analysis upon meta-analysis slowly get done only recently, that's like a meta-analysis of various studies is a beautiful new concept to sports science. Woo! Mostly in a funny way. And things don't line the fuck up, we've got a bit of a shambles. My favorite example, which I'm going to explain it anecdotally, mostly because I can't remember any of the details to just give you the source and do everything right. I find that humorous. Is knees over toes. Your knee will explode and your children's bloodline will end with your next awfully mutated child. If your knee goes past your toes while bearing weight. This is humorous to me because this was data taken from a study on the mostly optimal knee in relation to angle, so the angle of the shin bone or the tibia and fibula. While you have your kit as a soldier on your back, while you jump X amount of feet out of Black Hawk, because they wanted to see how they could reduce the amount of sudden knee injuries upon deployment. Now this is a known one. This is like if you've actually learnt anything in grassroots sports science in the last 5, 8, 10 years. Yeah, 10's not a bad number for this. If you've learnt in the last 10 years, most people know this one. If you didn't know about that, you may be behind, but that doesn't mean you can't keep learning. Jesus Christ, please. So that is my example of one of the we must kill this because it gets in our way. And people still carry that baggage in actions that they're taught by previous instructors and teachers, that they didn't realize that that was the idea that created the pattern and idea they now teach and propagate. Do you know why your coach said your knee must point forwards? There's also a bunch of biomechanical issues caused by the fact that most books are side-on, and they show the thing side-on. This is also subsequently an issue because reading is a skill that takes the kind of effort that any skillful person would devote towards it in a way that you would feel immense pride when you can accomplish it, and complete understanding that lots of people truly can't do it, right? It's the same as like high-end carpentry. And that's just reading. Reading where a human is in space, where their joints line up, the angle of their bones, the clicks, the halts, the stalling out, the position of their spine, how it interacts with everything more proximal and more distal. If there's anything more proximal than your spine, tell me about it. I want to hear about it. So to be able to see all those things, and then how the angle of the head can affect pressure on the feet and vice versa. To be able to truly see and observe these things is just as much of a horrifically difficult skill that must be honed, tested, and constantly done. And this form of observation, this observation of things, is like the judgment that like people like George Silver were talking about. So can you truly judge? Can you see? An even further detour, because I'm great at them, is this idea that there is no evolutionary need for a human to be able to observe objective reality perfectly. The bare minimum is that we can observe enough information that we can eventually, with the other parts of survival being accomplished, reproduce. That's the bar. That's actually such a high bar, and yet equally low bar. So to be able to observe objective reality, someone's skill at that can be reasonably questioned and can be reasonably critiqued and reasonably looked at as, do they have a weaker skill of such? In a professional idea, I say that because you can't just go around questioning if people can observe objective reality. They shit themselves and they freak out. Or they call you a nutcase because they're too busy trying to buy their shopping. They're just trying to get to work, or they're just trying to like play their sport. Like, fuck, there's no slow down there. So you've got this hurdle of, well, humans are not built to observe all objective reality. We are built to observe whatever's required for us to eventually fuck. Oh, that's a much lower bar. And then We're trying to jury rig whatever observation skills we have to the movement patterns and ideas of a human, then occasionally putting them through filters of politics and misguided ideas of art that are still within misguided ideas of science. Yeah, right. And this is how we end up with quackery. And when you look at it through that kind of like, oh, that's how it develops as an idea, that it could develop like that. It's also kind of hard to be mean to people for being quacks. It's like being mean to a child. Like, sure. Brilliant. Be mean to the kids. Aren't you just a strong individual? So all of that observation and ability to observe needs to then be looked at like a fine art, like a fine trade. And you want to be able to develop it like such. How do you observe better? Adaptation. Jury rigging your natural human's ability to adapt to their surroundings if required helps improve that. Having the feeling that I need to be able to see what is happening better for my survival jury rigs that in a really cool way. So what are you observing? Hiccups, pauses, adjustments, breaks of comfort, voids stalling out, odd accelerations and decelerations, actions that get in the way. For me, it has become, firstly, noticing where an athlete's natural pauses are and using the justification part of my brain, the emotional justification, to come to a fairly not too far off idea to why they feel like they're doing the correct thing. I'm allowed to be wrong, but I try and create this narrative every time. They put their heel and their foot in closer, but their head goes backwards ever so slightly. Yes, every single part of that person's entire being, this entire athlete, this entire human, did go forwards, as like an example. They did go forwards. We cannot dispute that fact. The distance between every single part of that person and the distance of that between then every single part of their opponent or fencing partner or other player did in fact get shorter. These are indisputable when someone lunges towards you. But there are many ways to move that even though everything went forwards, due to the body's already going to do things, usually in self-preservation or injury prevention, in weakness and in strength. The way that you move forwards could honestly be creating void and space between the two players. And lots of people intuitively feel that void and space and try and place sticks and vibes into them. So if my feet go forwards, my head gets closer to you. But the relationship of how much my head goes forwards compared to my feet, and then everything in between, so my shoulders, my hips, my knees, all of those things also greatly affect everything above and below. If I do that in such a way that my head and maybe my upper torso doesn't go into the space that you thought you were filling enough, there is void, there is space, and then the other person slots an attack in, a cavazione, a low line thrust, a yielded thrust to the head, neck, a Duplirin-esque cutting behind the blade side to your head or to your shoulders, a ducking cut towards the legs, a ducking cut towards the hips, towards the waist, a boar's thrust, so a ducking thrust up towards the head, neck, chest. All that void that you created, if you only look at the idea that, but all of those things were going forwards, what do you mean I created space? That's delusional. But you were creating space in relation to the rest of your body, and the other person just could feel it. And when a moron can feel it, a great fencer can feel it. How do you expect to beat a great fencer if you can't beat a moron? They're feeling the same thing. Sometimes they're even making the same actions. So that void and how it's created is greatly important to me. The part of your body that you expect to be impacting with the ground at the end of your lunge can greatly dictate how that void manifests, if it even does. The angle of your knee and your foot does such, and that angle also affects your hips, but not just the raw bones, but all the structures that interact with such, like your glutes, your hamstring, your quads, your Taylor's muscle, sartorius? No. I haven't said that word in a while, so we'll go with the Taylor's muscle. Your TFL, your tensor fascia latae, your, I don't know, your VMO, like all these muscles which exist. All affect your hip structure and where your hip is in space. A fully externally rotated femur struggles to externally rotate any further. Wild concept. A perfect L position, if you look down and you see that you have a perfect L position, not just in foot, but in knee, for most people hits the contraction limit of their glutes. And it means at the start of their lunge and their actions, their glutes kind of need to isometrically contract just to hold the position, which means that they're also doing nothing to do with your sudden increase of distance between the knees and between the ankles and between the toes of each leg. Between the two legs, if that helps stop you being confused. So you're losing this whole aspect of the hip structure. And then things misfire and feel awful. But with training, we can overcome. Continue on your warrior's path. Continue hurting yourself. I hope it feels great later. A very slight internal rotation of the foot, of the knee, causes the glute of all things to be not as contracted. Oh. Meaning that when you lift your foot, your glute can do things that help your knee and foot externally rotate and reach. What a wild concept. You can have a part of your body assist in the manner. This is not to overfit. This is not to reach 110% of your potential. This is not that, yes, now I can be 120% strong. What? No. This is you actually going maybe somewhere near 100% for the first time in your life. Sometimes that's not required. Some people do brilliant without it. Good for them. I have questions for them in the future, but not now. But that is an example of fighting more dogmatic ideas. It's helping me develop. When you look at photos of old martial arts books, old fencing books even, due to people's observations, we can both see two different things. And I can ask you, where do you think their foot is pointing? And I can be absolutely jaw-droppingly stunned by the answer, because we're both looking at the same image. And then if I point out certain things that I see in it, I don't do it in a mean way, then I watch as your objective observation of reality starts to change. As your skill of objectively observing what is in front of you maybe slightly improves. It could just be a slight buff, and it could be permanently. An example of this is asking people where they believe the foot is pointed and how, in things like Tybalt, Fabris, Capoferro, Maya. And they show me, and it's like, oh, so why don't you do that? And then they come up with a few things, and it's like, oh, why do you think that is applicable? Oh, okay. All right, have fun. Like if you look at Capoferro, Maya's really great for it, but let's look at Capoferro and Fabris. There are many times where, because they are naked, you can see things. Wild. The amount of calf, not cross-sectional size, let's not get distracted by such. The amount of calf that you can see And the amount of shin you cannot see, sometimes, if you observe that, changes your idea of how they're sitting in space. The amount of space behind the knee rotated around, like if you look dead on from the side, perfectly fucking perpendicular, you can see X amount of back of knee. And you can see X amount of front of knee. And yet they are drawn in some interactions to show less front of knee, more back of knee than your usual interpretation of how rotated the leg is would agree with. Oh. That's quite startling. That's quite, oh. Another detour, because I'm great at them. Look at this idea. I think it was Emerald Green discussing Victorian era ideas of science and philosophy. Just this overarching idea that, well, in the Victorian era, to them they were reaching the peak of humanity. And you actually find that idea in all moments of the past. We know the most we've ever known now. We know more now about now and before than ever before. Each one of us truly is the denizen of the libraries of Alexandria. We know things, and we know better than those before us. Maya didn't know that he had to tell you not to do shoehorned French fencing ideas that went over to Japan, got then co-opted by the right-wing progression of martial arts in Japan due to Savate, due to hilariously stolen from German forms and parade. He didn't know that he had to stop you getting the knee angle that was then taken from France 200 years later to Japan, then taught to white people after World War II, then brought back to Western culture. It's like, this is the optimal way to position your leg for these reasons. He didn't know that he had to stop you listening to any of that shit show. Who the fuck could see that coming? Wild. Who could see that coming, right? All these authors could not see some of the quackery, some of the co-opt, some of the ideas that now get in our way. They couldn't see that coming. In everything we know, we still don't know what we shouldn't apply where. Wild, right? So, what am I working on? The observation of how people move. The observation of how those movements create space and void or crush them. The observation of how movements create play, create stability, create movement, create potentiality, create next actions. actions. If your current action stops your future actions, why do your current action? Please justify. And justify it to yourself. The observation of how people move, creating space between us. The observation of how ideas of movement create back doors, create ease, are to answer questions that distract from original design briefs. I would also come up with motor mechanics that allow me to win the 18xx rules of foil so that my French fencers can win due to the rules easily over the Italians. I would also come up with some funny answers that, yes, when we go fence, shit gets squirrely and weird, but the ref gave me right of way. I also would come up with weird mechanics because I also would like to win, and I also would like my students to win. And then we start changing the physics of it all. And then we wonder why ideas change in ways that create such different outcomes. So observing is probably my main thing I'm working on, but it branches off so egregiously into different spaces, and to ignore where it grows to, I don't know. It's like ignoring when your garden starts growing and you're like, I must prune it or I must let it grow. I must do one or the other. It is doing things. Where do I guide it? And right now, letting it grow is definitely better than pruning it for the fuck of it. What else am I working on? Naming what I'm observing. Trying to use as coherent language as possible, and observing that the words and the experience for the other person needs to be methodical, intentional, and I must be responsible. I must be the adult. I must be the stronger one, whatever that means. Not to convince them, but so that they do have the experience I'm expecting them to have. And then hopefully, due to that experience, they can come to an amount of the thoughts I'm expecting them to have. Everyone has different experiences. Everyone perceives things differently. Everyone does X, Y, Z differently. Yes. And being responsible for those things in the face of that? No, not in the face of that. On top of, taking that into account is a gargantuan, horrific task. But to not attempt means that you miss a lot of things. A gargantuan, horrific task is not to be shied away from, right? But just observed. So I'm working on what is the experience of the person in front of me, and what does that create? as a teacher and as a fencer. Naming what I am experiencing, naming what they are experiencing, naming what my action does and what it tries to accomplish, even the parts of it that go without saying. If it goes without saying, you should say it. I know many people who go, yes, but that goes without saying, as a way to ignore it. It's like, yes, but that does occur, and that occurs regardless, so it's irrelevant. No. I'm finding more and more times where that is actually a way of shying away from spending the calories and spending the blood sugar and spending the glucose processing it. Selling the dream of it being simpler and easier than it is. I don't know. We all have ideas on salesmen. What am I working on? I'm working on observing with my fucking eyes. Observing with my sense of touch, observing with my ears, observing with my ability to process what I'm actually seeing and admit what I'm seeing. Observing halts, accelerations, decelerations, pauses, space, void, crunch. Observing the past's interaction with the present's interaction with the future, interaction with the present, interaction with the past. And observing those three moments at the same time. Observing where the potential futures can be and how those potential futures can be changed. Just because you can't change the future with an action done now, as like a broad concept, you can affect what potential futures may occur with what you do now, which is as close to as you're getting. So why not do that? I'm annoyed. If you're 53 minutes into this, you've probably been playing this at 1.5 or 2 times speed. And you've been kind of just letting me ramble in the corner. That's cool. I want to give you something very tangible now. As I was learning about sports science and learning about human interactions and movements, I had a very profound experience with learning truly the idea of static and dynamic balance are wholly two entirely different things. Balance is such a broad concept that really equilibrium is kind of carries the right baggage to unfuck the thing a little better. Not perfectly, but better. But dynamic balance is this idea of, as a skill, your ability to traverse through space without being destabilized by how you're traversing. And to remain continuing what you were trying to accomplish, as a very broad way of breaking it. And static balance is how you can remain in equilibrium exactly where you are, regardless of external forces. Now, both skills are individual skills that complement each other and do have interplay, but they are two separate skills. If your idea of a stance or position or way of standing, that your sole highest value is to be able to stoically, empirically resist any sudden impulse of force in all directions, you must critically analyze if that is even required. If you or your student have any ability of observation, you may come to a conclusion of that. And then you may observe that, oh, well, while I'm fencing and I'm in that position, if they come forwards to shove me, or they come forwards to shove me from the side, will I react? Will I have time to react? Will I be fencing? I don't know, will you? It's almost not a given, right? We're dealing with such a... I can't trust that you're doing that if you're so worried about old mate coming forwards but somehow getting 45 degrees perpendicular to you and pushing you laterally. Or running forwards and just shoving you backwards. If you're missing all the fencing in between, I don't know if you're truly observing anything that is currently occurring. But if you are, will that occur? Or will you be given opportunities to suddenly maybe be in a position to resist it? So that means that you could be in a, funnily enough, jackass position and then suddenly choose upon your observations that things may in the future go towards this getting shoved future, that then maybe you could make the decision on whether you want to resist it or not. And does your current position of being able to resist a shove that may occur in the future, does it get in the way? Like, I don't know. Does it stop you doing anything else that you kind of maybe want to be doing? Because every time you make an action or make a movement from that one position, you will lose that trait. So are you just in a hurry to always have that trait of all things above all else? And does that help you? Does it? So if you don't have powers of observation and you're worried that someone's going to shove you, cool. Take that position, cool. But what if they try and hit you with the sword? Do we just stack on top of that? Does that position help you with moving your sword? Does that position help you with moving away from theirs towards theirs? Does that position help you do all the things that is not resisting a low chance of happening potential future that you would need to have not observed so fucking much data and fencing to miss the opportunity to then figure out if you want to resist it. And then, after all that, is that even a better decision than just moving out of the way? I don't know, there's so many decisions you can make to do so much. There is a whole world of experience and things you can do that I would argue may be more likely to occur and may be more likely to be available to assist in your hopes and dreams, which may include donking this person across from you with a funny metal stick, that may not be available to you if you're resisting an imaginary outcome that is very unlikely to occur, and you resisting it may not even be the best answer for most renditions and variations of that outcome. Maybe. These are purely observations I'm making, and I'm not done. You've been listening to me talk for an hour and 1 minute and 40 seconds. One of the things that I'm working on is the relationship of the iridation effect, how it affects more proximal joints and their stability. Also the position of various parts of the body due to the iridation effect, and also the position of the sword in relation to your opponent's targets, and also your, points of movement. And then the iridation effects on your potentiality to move, your potentiality to stabilize, your potentiality to dynamically move, create void, create space, crush void. And then coupling it with the relationship of the kinetic cross sling, so the relationship of the right shoulder to the left hip, the right hip to the left shoulder, and how that affects potentiality of action. And then how that, all of those ideas can affect what you are doing mechanically, and when and why. Then finding surprising changes that you can make to someone's fencing for actions and reactions that you could not say seem incorrect or wrong, because nothing feels wrong, nothing seems incorrect, nothing looks bad. But once you use these ideas and fiddle with them, then you go, oh, does that mean this thing that doesn't feel like there's anything going wrong and doesn't feel like it's actually creating any issues, is it actually helpful whatsoever? Oh no. Oh, can I get you to do this? Oh, it's creating this hiccup that you don't even notice nor feel, and you can do X action, then overcome the hiccup, then do your next action. That means your reaction, post-reaction, like potential next action, becomes 3 things when it could have easily been 2. And then could have easily been a single slider gradient, so there was never going to be a or and it just becomes and it's just a continuation. You just slide back and back in, like, oh, How do you get alacrity and freedom of movement? I don't know. Remove all the rocks out of your river. Let them all smooth out. You can remove rocks faster than you can wait for them to smooth out. And then you have less rocks that need to smooth out. I see nothing in my analogy that is faulty, and that's because I'm brilliant. If there's anything sports science wise that I've mentioned that you're like, I don't know what the fuck that means. I think I can't remember the book's name, but like the National Strength and Conditioning NSCA, National Strength and Conditioning America, something like that. I don't know. I trust in your ability to find it. It's a strength and conditioning book. I think they're up to their 4th or 5th edition. It's a few $100. It's a good book. My entire diploma was based on that one book. And I think it was like 3rd edition when I got it. And I lent it to someone like 10 years ago, and I'm still angry I never got it back. I've been meaning to buy their 5th edition. I'm just lazy. I've got other data points just getting fucking thrown at me so violently by other books. And then I'm like, all right, the flow of info that is still getting slammed into my poor brain is still frying me. And I get to have all these thoughts that you've just heard with the amount of fucking info just getting slammed into my poor skull. But you should look at maybe that kind of book, like all these like kind of paywalled ideas, because sport is part of the entertainment industry, and when it's part of the entertainment industry, you kind of need to keep your cards close to your fucking chest, or you don't make any money. So you kind of need to pay to win, which sucks. I don't know. Trick old mate into buying the book for you. Figure it out. I don't know. That was a tremendous wealth of information for me, and it made all these ideas flower out. If I'd never learnt of those things existing, I don't think I'd ever have come to the conclusions nor observed and seen the things I've seen, especially in the last year. No wonder other people don't see it. That's duh. So, yeah. Don't ask me questions to explain anything through here. Use the ideas and go find it somewhere else with different words from a different source and make connections. That will help your observation better than just asking the closest source. Go find it. Go find the black swan. Go get surprised. Then throw that at me. That would be cool. I'd like that. Hopefully this inspires someone to think, or at least like know that you can begin thinking like this. Hopefully this gives you permission to think deeper and to attack things. Why did you go and do this thing? You weren't meant to try that hard, or you weren't meant to do X, Y, Z. Yes, but in that design brief, you were never told not to be great.